For more than 10 days now, Iran has been, well, on fire. What started as desperate cries about the economy has just ignited into this huge nationwide movement, and honestly, the situation is getting more critical by the day.
Just listen to this. One report described the scene at Tehran's famous Grand Bazaar with those exact words. It looked like a war zone. You've got protesters clashing with security forces, tear gas filling the air. It's just a really stark picture of a nation that's been pushed to its absolute limits. And take a look at this number, 27 out of 31. That's how many of Iran's provinces are seeing these protests. So we're not talking about some small, localized issue here. This is a nationwide uprising, and it's engulfing nearly the entire country.
Okay, so let's start right there, on the streets, and really try to understand the human and political cost of this fire that's spreading.
Now, this didn't just happen overnight. It actually started more than 10 days ago with a single spark. On December 28th, shopkeepers in Tehran, who were just furious about their currency collapsing, took to the streets. But that spark caught fire, and it caught fire fast. University students joined in, and then the movement just exploded from the capital out to cities all across the country.
And the regime's crackdown has been absolutely brutal. Now, Tehran hasn't released any official numbers, but rights groups are reporting a really heavy toll. We're talking at least 36 people dead, over 60 injured, and get this, more than 2,000 people arrested. And what are people chanting? They're chanting slogans against the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, calling for the entire regime to be overthrown.
So you have to ask, what is fueling all of this rage on the streets? Well, to understand that, we have to look at an economy that's in an absolute freefall.
Just try to imagine living with an inflation rate that's hovering near 50%. That is the daily reality for Iranians. Life is already incredibly tough, and you've got families struggling just to make ends meet. So, if things were already so bad, what was the specific spark that lit this latest fire? Well, it comes down to a critical government policy that affects every single household in the country.
It all comes down to something called the subsidized dollar rate. Now, think of it like a core promise from the government to its people. For years, this special exchange rate kept essential imports, things like food and medicine, affordable. It was a really crucial lifeline in an already struggling economy.
Well, that lifeline is now being cut. In a huge sign of just how desperate the government is, the central bank is slashing this subsidy. So that promise? It's being broken. And that means importers and producers are now going to have to pay far, far more for the exact same products.
And this right here is the result. The Iranian currency, the rial, has utterly crashed. To put it into perspective for you, if you were to exchange just $1 US, you'd get 1.4 times million rial in return. This staggering collapse is what originally drove those shopkeepers into the streets to begin with.
So how is the Iranian leadership responding to this spiraling crisis? Well, it's this really strange mix of candid admissions and really hardline threats.
In a moment of really striking honesty, President Masud Pezeshkian pretty much admitted that the government is overwhelmed. His exact words were, "The state does not have that capacity." I mean, that is a stunning admission of weakness coming from the very top. But at the very same time, the regime is trying to project strength. Iran's top judge has a completely different message. He's promising there will be, quote, no leniency for the rioters. So you see this crucial point, right? You're getting two totally conflicting messages, one of weakness and the other of force. And to justify the crackdown, the regime is falling back on a very familiar tactic, blaming outsiders. The top judge is claiming these protests are being fueled by Iran's enemies, specifically naming the US and Israel. The idea is to say that anyone in the streets isn't a patriot, they're operating in line with these foreign enemies. So all of this, it paints a picture of a nation that is just teetering on the edge, caught between a desperate population and a completely uncompromising regime.
The message coming from the leadership is becoming crystal clear. They are sending a signal that they're preparing for an even bigger crackdown. They intend to respond to these protests with more force, which, let's be honest, can only mean more tension and more conflict in the days ahead.
And this leaves us with the ultimate question. With the desperate people on one side and a regime promising force on the other, the two are on a collision course. You have to wonder, what is Iran's breaking point?